Got everybody here. All right, we will go ahead and call the regular meeting of the Planning Commission, Tuesday, August 8th, meeting, call it to order. Mr. City Clerk, want to do our roll call, please?
Commissioner Aleman?
Present.
Commissioner Stover?
Present.
Commissioner Wagstaff?
Present.
Vice Chair Nindell?
Present.
Chair Voss?
Present. Commissioner Wagstaff, will you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
All right. Have all commissioners had a chance to read what the agenda is? If so, we'll take a motion and a second for the approval of the agenda. Going once, going twice.
I move to approve the agenda.
Looks like he has the thingy up here working, so that's good. Do we have a second?
All right, second.
All right, please vote.
Uh-oh. I just voted against on accident.
Oh, boy. Oh,
Was the push button not?
okay.
Motion passes unanimously.
Moving on to minutes, we have minutes for the July 11th and July 25th meeting. If there's no questions or comments or anything on those, then we will take a motion and a second for those.
I move to approve both meeting minutes of July 11th and July 25th.
I'll second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Okay, well, I'll just press it. All right, there we go. Looks like we're all good.
Oh, sorry.
Get what you need.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Public comments. Do we have any public comments for items that are not on the agenda?
We have none, sir.
Nothing, okay? Then we will move on to the agenda. All right, so public hearing item number 1, recommendation to the City Council amending a chapter of Title 17. Mr. Community Development Director, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. Tonight, we have just one chapter of Title 17 to present to you. 17.12 Commercial Districts. So before I got into the changes, I just wanted to do a kind of a refresher on the land use table review. You'll see within the chapter a table with all the uses presented in the column and the degree of permittance at the top. And so they're broken down between permitted, this is a use permitted by right within the zone, no conditions if it's existing development. The applicant usually just needs to pull a business license and in some instances obtain a certificate of occupancy. New development, however, will require a development permit. I'll get into that in a minute. Then the next level of more authority, I guess, is an administrative use permit. This is a discretionary review at the staff level whereby the use is approved in the zone with conditions of approval. And then the third level is conditional use permit, a CUP. This is a discretionary review by the Planning Commission whereby the use is approved in the zone, again with conditions of approval. Not permitted is indicated by the dash. So also wanted to refresh your memory about when development permits are required. So regardless of the allowable uses, if it's a new major ground up development or an expansion above 20% of the square feet, then that would require a development permit. And all the development permits would come before the Planning Commission. Also, the same applies for design review. Usually this is an architecture and landscape architecture review for the developments that have already have an overall approval, such as a specific plan or a residential tract. These also come to the Planning Commission for review. So moving on to the changes that are proposed in Chapter 17.12. We removed the visitor serving commercial zone from this chapter, and it's going to be combined with another visitor serving mixed use zone, which is currently in the mixed use chapter, to create a new chapter on visitor serving. That way, all of that information will be in one chapter. We reorganized the design standards into a table for ease of use instead of a narrative. We moved up the design guidelines below the design standards, and this is a pattern that we're doing with all the chapters to get those two components close together. We generally changed the permitted uses table to be less restrictive. So in some cases, it may have required a CUP, and we were suggesting AUP. In other instances, there's been more restrictive. So, for example, one is off-site alcohol sales. We've made that a CUP, so all of those would come before you. We've also added the new uses so far that we talked about in the general provisions chapter, such as the mobile food vending vehicle, or i.e. food truck parks, the cannabis lounge, event facility, and indoor retail concessions to the use table. We added the ability, this is kind of the major change, added the ability to develop multifamily residential and live-work uses in the downtown commercial district. This would encourage more mixed-use type of projects. Right now, residential is not permitted in any of the commercial zones, and in a lot of very lively, vibrant downtowns, you'll see that mix of uses, especially the vertical mix of uses. And that's what we're trying to encourage in our downtown. We did also expand for the ability to develop a residential care facility, i.e. a senior living center, in 3 commercial zones: neighborhood commercial, general commercial, and downtown commercial again. Minor modifications to the specific standards sections. We did add an outdoor sales and display section to the specific standards. You will recall this was removed from requiring a temporary use permit. We said we could cover it in the requirements here on the commercial districts, and so that's been added. And it's basic things like ensuring a path of travel in front of the sidewalk, securing the product against the wind, those types of things. And we removed many of the regulations surrounding tattoo and body piercing establishments. So they were quite extensive in the chapter. We basically kept one, which is the distance between the two, but reduced the overall distance. So that is maintained at a 300-foot separation versus a 1,000-foot separation. So that's the summary of the changes. I did want to bring to your attention when we were reviewing the tattoo section again. There is kind of an inconsistency between language that's in the section, which basically allows it in 3 districts, and the use table, which allows it in all 5. So we would have to clean that up here tonight. And that's all I have. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have or take any comments.
All right, great, thank you. Okay, entertaining questions of staff from the commission. Do any commissioners have any questions, comments? Jim, do you have any? You want to?
Go ahead.
All right.
I did notice housing is always a concern for me, especially transitional housing and single room occupancy. And I noticed that those were not allowed in any of these commercial zones. And I'm wondering if the director could please describe for me why that is, and how that's being remedied.
So these are kind of more appropriate into residential zones. And so when we're reviewing the residential chapters, they will be in those zones under certain residential land uses, mainly residential high density and residential medium density.
I have have another question, I guess. In the objective standards, in the outdoor dining section, as we're going down, I noticed that all outdoor dining is going to require a permit and rental fees of the outdoor space. And I'd like to lower the financial bar for our vendors in some way. Even I'm thinking if we were to allow someone to have one table, maybe, I understand why we need to permit things. But I'm wondering if we can't put the standard to be outdoor dining areas over 25 square feet. So for example, if we had across the street the bodega that's going in and wants to serve the nice Pete's coffee, and they would like to have a little table on the sidewalk so that you could enjoy a cup of coffee and enjoy the day. And I don't see that as problematic in the same way that I don't see that outdoor displays for the businesses are. Is that a possibility to modify that?
It's something I'd probably want to discuss with Public Works. So typically, when you're using public property, it's an encroachment, especially if it's something that's long-term like this. Just familiar with some other cities I work with where we did have outdoor dining kind of on a permanent basis in the public right-of-way. It might have been an alley, it may have been a wider sidewalk where that was possible. There was usually some sort of lease agreement between the owner of the restaurant and the city, and part of that would cover things like insurance. So if something happened in that space, there would be a guarantee that the city was well insured and indemnified. As far as the amount that would be something that would be set by city council in an agreement with that particular business.
But as planning commissioners, are we not able to modify the language so that a business owner could have, for example, one small table out front to enjoy coffee or 25 square feet of area, just like we would allow a business person to put a rack of clothes out or something, an outdoor display?
The Planning Commission could definitely make that recommendation to City Council. It is within your purview to make a recommendation. Where I see it, if that's something that the Planning Commission would like to entertain, it's under 17.12.250, dealing with outdoor dining. The only thing is that obviously there would be some caveats that we would need to, obviously double check with Public Works and that kind of thing. But it is within the Planning Commission purview if you wanted to take, I'm going to make something up, but something like, 10% of the overall, square footage for outdoor dining, so long as it comports with all ADA requirements and things like that, something like that. But that's where it would go should the Planning Commission make that recommendation to council.
So we require now an encroachment permit, or do we allow it at all?
So typically, an encroachment permit is something for more permanent in this case.
Yeah.
In other words, a restaurant is proposing a long-term use of the sidewalk, and that would generally require an encroachment permit for Public Works versus somebody just setting out tables for the day during the street festival.
Right.
That's kind of the difference.
And so would somebody setting out a table for the day for the street festival be required to file a permit?
Not an encroachment permit, no.
If it's not public right-of-way, is there anything prohibiting them now?
No.
Okay, so if they know that it's not public right-of-way, they can do it now. And so some of these, I'm sure, aren't in the public right-of-way, right?
If it's on the sidewalk, it's in the public right-of-way, isn't it?
No, not always. Just because it's sidewalk doesn't mean that it always is public right.
I would defer to the director. Can you?
Depends on where the right-of-way line is, just because they have that.
Yeah, it does. In some cases, there's private sidewalk alongside a public sidewalk.
Right.
It makes it a little bit wider. In most cases, it is a public sidewalk. I think the vast majority of these are going to be on private property, right adjacent to the restaurant. Only in a few instances would it be on the sidewalks, and our sidewalks in the city aren't generally very wide.
Right.
So there's not a lot of capacity there in the first place to put tables on a permanent basis. But if you do go to other cities, you'll see where they have sort of an area fenced off, might be the wrought iron fence. Again, that's usually a permanent situation, and there's an agreement put between the city and the proprietor for some sort of rent to cover any kind of expenses the city may incur, and then again, the insurance provisions and things like that.
So since I was the one that put together and basically wrote the ordinance for the city of Palm Springs, if you go up into the uptown area, that's from Alejo north, they wanted to be able to have what you're talking about, including outdoor display, is what they wanted. And the issue came just like this. If it's in the public right-of-way, you needed to have an encroachment permit. That's what the city attorney recommended. If it was not, then you could have your items there, but you could have like 3 items, no more than 3 items out front. So it couldn't be like a flea market, but you could have no more than 3 items out there. You did not need a permit for it. All you had to do was basically get the right-of-way map, go check it with city.
Well, we've already figured that out with the outdoor display, and that's embodied here in this text, and I'm grateful to the staff for being so attentive to that. But I'd like to see us provide the same opportunity to our small restaurants. I'm not talking like put a big dining area out there. I'm just thinking like the guy across the street. He's got a little bodega. He wants to sell a pastry and a coffee and have a little bistro table, just a little thing, not blocking the ingress or egress or ADA or any of those
But
good things.
there's nothing prohibiting that now if it's private property.
But in the instance that it's not private property, if it is the public, I'm speaking here specifically about the public
The public
right-of-way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it would, sounds to me like litigation is an issue. Insurance, covering the cost of that, liability. That was for you.
Yeah, yes, it is. So that's why if it's in the public right-of-way, and again, it's more of a permanent type of use, where they have a fenced area, then yeah, you would want a development permit to be issued by the city, and within that permit, we could make sure that, the insurance is obtained, again, any cost to the city for allowing it to be there. Also, any investigation of utilities that might be under the sidewalk. I had one such instance where there was a gas main right under where they wanted to put the outdoor dining, which was fine. They just could not dig in certain places to put the supports for the post. So things like that are things that the city would be looking for in the development permit. And again, if it's in the public right-of-way, it'd be an encroachment
Oh,
permit.
is there anything prohibiting that now?
No,
So somebody could do it now?
they could.
Okay. They just need to have, which is a very common thing, you got to show proof of the insurance, release a liability to the city. You pay a fee, whatever that fee is, usually it's a fairly nominal fee. And then you have it, just you measured out what you're going to do. And it shows the measurements, and you can use it 5-7 days a week or 1 day a week, whatever you choose to do.
Right.
Well,
Okay.
that, I think we're talking about apples and oranges, because I think you're talking about a big permanent dining room or a parklet where, like we saw during the pandemic, where everybody started dining outdoors. I'm just talking about the little guy, the little business owner who wants to pop a table out every morning and so you could have coffee, pop it back in.
It's-
Just a little,
It's the same thing.
thing.
It's the same thing.
but what is the fee, what is the permitting fee for that encroachment permit?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. Colleen, do you? Yeah, we can look it up.
Okay, because I just think it might be cost prohibitive, and I just want to be as kind as we can to our small business people.
I think if it comes down to liability, 10 square feet or 100 square feet is the same. An injury could happen and liability could fall on the city or the business owner. And the smaller the business, the less likely they are to carry enough insurance. So,
I mean, what it seems to me is that maybe what we're really looking at is a public information thing. Just letting the businesses know, these are the options you can do. If it's in the right of way, here's the step 1, 2, 3 you got to do. If it's not in the right of way, you're good. I mean, Because we're allowing this to happen now. There's nothing prohibiting it. I have no idea what the fee is, but the fee is set by a study that's instituted, I don't know, every couple of years. It does cost recovery fee, and then it gets approved by the council. We don't set fees, so that's how that's done.
Right.
But I mean, I agree with you. I think we're in the desert. We have some great days where we should be doing that.
Yeah.
Like tonight would be great, right? Finally can sit outside. It's more of a public information thing. Because what you're asking for can be done right now.
It can't, again, you're apples and oranges, because you're talking about in the private right-of-way as opposed to the public right-of-way.
No, I'm talking both.
Yeah.
Well, it can be done, but I want it to be not cost prohibitive for just the little guy to
Well,
put
the cost
out a
prohibitive
little.
is nothing more than the permit. They can hand draw and measure.
Right, but didn't we just go through this with the outdoor displays? It is cost prohibitive if you have to go through all of that and take your time out of your business and come over here, make an application just to put a little table out to sell a $2 coffee. I mean, you got to sell a lot of coffee to pay $150
Right, and so
permitting
What we
fee.
did as a commission is we made a recommendation to city council to lower that fee. So it sounds like,
Well, the fees are only lowered through initiative, so I don't think that is really, I don't know I think I don't think that's what I'm looking for, really. I don't even know what the fee is.
I think, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the fee isn't necessarily within the planning commission's jurisdiction anyways. What is within the jurisdiction, though, is a recommendation to council. If this is something that the commission as a whole, after you open and close the public hearing, would like to see as a use for outdoor dining, that could be made into the motion. But I also think that what the chair is saying is that the city has, this is what I'm hearing, the city currently has a manner to actually do that now, to actually get a permit for outdoor dining now. And again, the fee, I don't know what it is. It's not, we're sitting as a planning commission. But it would be a recommendation to the city council similar to that of what we did in the outdoor display. So it's up to you.
Mr. Community Development Director?
Yes.
This goes through planning. You guys, they'll check egress, right-of-way, ADA compliance, so there is some staff
Yep.
fees incurred and
Yep.
all that. And regardless of the size, you still need to go through that same process.
That's correct.
Yeah.
For something that's permanent like that, that's correct.
Okay.
Distance from the driveways, driveway approaches, again, any underground utilities that might be there.
Even on a temporary, they would still
Yeah.
technically need
Yeah,
to
like-
go through that
like-
because our sidewalks aren't
Wide.
of new standards. So a chair and a table could theoretically make it impassable for somebody
Yeah.
in the ADA.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
so maybe the thing to do is just have, where planning commission is encouraging that businesses are aware of what they can do, and that we would recommend a competitive, low-cost fee for this to support our local businesses. Because everything you're asking for, they can do. We just don't know what the fee is.
Right.
And frankly, I don't know what type of outreach we do through our economic development department, but they could probably do, an email and a flyer or that kind of thing to let our businesses know, or when they send out business license renewals, those kind of things, and let them know that, hey, guess what, you can do this. Here's what you have to do if it's private, here's what you got to do if it's public.
Well, this seems like it's not going to go anywhere today.
I have some other questions.
Okay.
In table 17.1201, restaurants with a drive-through, I'd like to see those changed to a conditional use permit in the commercial neighborhood district.
Okay.
Just in case we don't run over any kids.
That's purely a policy decision on the part of the commission
Okay.
and council.
Oh, so that's not a question? I should save that for later.
Well, what we would want to do is get some consensus for
Yeah.
each one of these changes among the planning commission, so we could take them.
All right, well, I'm going to toss it out there anyway. Also, I think mini malls are not appropriate in the commercial downtown district. I think it's the opposite of what we want to do for a walking district.
Yeah, I would concur with that one.
And I'd also like to see caretakers' quarters and ADUs allowed as accessory in all districts. I know that I'm going to lose that one. Oh, and one last thing. Table 17.1202, the one with all the pluses and minuses.
Yep.
It's totally illegible and redundant and gave me a headache, and I just stopped reading immediately. And because it's redundant to the other information in the chapter, I would recommend just getting rid of it and, just simplifying that language to reflect that all projects will meet the objective standards.
Yeah, so what I thought about that one a little bit more. So I think what we could do, and I understand why the table is there, was likely a quick reference for when specific standards apply to certain uses. But I think what we could do is in the land use table, just some sort of indication of when there would be one, such as bolding or italicize the use, and then put in the specific sections that the requirements are. And then we could get rid of that table.
That would be super.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
I just have one thing. I kind of brought this up yesterday morning. Also under outdoor dining, which is 17.12.250120, there's this paragraph number 5 that I mentioned yesterday. It says the material and design of the furniture, including umbrellas and barrier, if any, shall be reviewed and approved by the reviewing authority prior to installation. The reviewing authority shall consider whether design of the furniture and barrier are integrated and compatible in terms of color, shape, and size with the adjacent restaurant, and shall further ensure that all outdoor furniture and other permitted structures are of a size, shape, and weight that can resist being moved in severe wind conditions. And my thought is, I'm always looking for ways to make it easier and faster and cheaper for businesses to come here and get running up and rolling. And this adds an approval process. I'm curious as to why we couldn't just set a standard for what this furniture and the barrier should look at, rather than adding an approval process that could happen weeks or months after the restaurant is ready to buy its own furniture and open and so forth. In other words, to set standards instead of leaving it up to an individual who is unidentified, it doesn't say whether it's code enforcement or someone else, to decide whether the colors, shape, and size of furniture is appropriate. That's my thought.
Just as devil's advocate, Jim, over here, coming out of the sky, I like that idea, but I think, though, that as far as I know, a lot of, haven't had a restaurateurs are very creative, and they have a style that they want to express, and I don't know that we want to pigeonhole people into a specific thing, but I do like your idea of there being a standard.
See, my thought is sort of the reverse of that. Give the restaurant owner the flexibility to create their style. A restaurant, a chain restaurant has a look that, is inside, outside, around, the colors, everything. And I think restaurant owners, already have a look in mind.
Right.
Yeah.
And know what they want to buy. And then they would just have to make sure it met the standards set by the city.
Yeah.
But would you want a city employee necessarily saying, I don't like the color of that chair? Or,
So you're
Yeah.
thinking more like the wind cowl?
Yeah, I mean,
the
set-
chairs are going to get blown into.
chairs must
and-
weigh X amount so they
Right.
don't blow away. Or
Okay.
chairs must be, or tables must be anchored, something like that. That's what I was thinking.
I think that's the point of this, and it's not an extra view, it's all part of the outdoor dining permit.
Mhm.
And the review authority in this case is the community development director, so we would be looking at all of that. As far as color, shape, and size, there's two words here, integrated and compatible with, whatever else the business is doing. I think they're going to do that anyway. But if you read further on, it talks about severe wind conditions. I think that was the intent of this paragraph.
Right, right.
Was to make sure it wasn't a lot of plastic chairs that get
But
blown
that's
off.
different from the color, shape, and, look
Yes.
of a chair.
Yeah, maybe not size and weight, but yeah, color and shape, yeah.
Well, what if we just eliminated color, size, and shape from the paragraph? Would it work for you?
Yeah, but I'm really more concerned about waiting for someone to show up to look at it. Because the city already has a perception that permits take a long time.
Yeah.
And businesses have to go through all kinds of hoops. This is another, in my mind, an unnecessary hoop
Yeah.
to go through. That's my only point.
I think it's a good
So if you
point.
had to kind of summarize what you're,
Set standards that any restaurant that wants to set up outdoor dining have just a simple standard for what furniture must look, feel, weigh, that type of thing. And take the human out of it. That's my only problem, is take the human out of it from the city. And, and then code enforcement at some point, if somebody's putting out chairs that blow away in 5-mile-an-hour wind, code enforcement would say something maybe.
Right.
But
okay.
Well, does that standard exist already?
No, and I think that kind of contrary to, I mean, you're saying have the city set a standard, and we probably could for, say, weight or something like that to protect against the wind, but we don't want to dictate style here.
Right.
And that's
Right,
not what this
right.
paragraph is doing. It's just saying
Right.
it's compatible with the restaurant. That's the really intent of this paragraph.
That's what I was asking. Is this a boiler for say, a Jack in the Box? And then on the same note, a boutique restaurant that has wooden seating outside with couch cushions or exterior cushions, and instead of that hard metal bolted down, it's open to that.
Yeah.
From what I'm reading, it's just you have to go through a quick approval, and community development director may say, I don't want, or the city doesn't want neon green chairs that are 4 feet wide, right down the main drag. So, I mean, I get there has to be some discretion, especially if we're looking to bring in multiple businesses or different businesses. Palm Springs, their downtown district, I mean, they're really eclectic, so,
Yeah.
and it works.
Well, I like the variety, actually.
Yeah.
I like it when all the stores look different from one another. It makes me interested to go walk in and say, what the heck is going on here?
To me, that sounds like you're trying to mitigate somebody coming in and putting up 30 lifetime tables and 400 plastic chairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So should we, do we create, or should I recommend then just having a minimum standards of, it's got to be, this weight, this secured, can't flap around, or it has to be secured, it has to be, that the winds can't blow it, or at least try not to.
I think that's already in there. It
It's already
says,
in there.
it
Okay.
says are of size, shape, and weight that can resist being moved in severe wind conditions. I don't think we need anything more than that.
So, I mean, was there something, is that, you obviously brought this up, so is that not meeting kind of what you're thinking, or is there maybe something else that you're?
No, like I said, my only thought was remove the extra layer of approval. Set a standard,
Well, they say they have one.
and, okay, and then if they do, that's fine.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, just so that we get a clean red line version to council, is number 6 to say material, like the material and design shall be in accordance with certain design guidelines? Do we have those guidelines? I mean, I'm wondering what number 6 should say.
Well, I think the standards there, it's I think what it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but you were talking more of how do we make it more expeditiously where they can be approved versus
Got it.
how many layers. So I guess the question for community development director is, how do we if somebody has a design or outdoor furniture they want right there, is this something that can be approved over the counter by the permit tech?
It would be part of their overall permit for outdoor dining. So they would show us
Okay,
where the area is that they want to fence off,
okay,
what kind of furniture they would want, if they want to put umbrellas in, that it would all be part of that same permit. Not necessarily over the counter, because we may have to ask Public Works about a question about
Right.
ingress and egress, but it's all one approval. It's not like multiple approvals. We would look at all of this at one time.
It's the planning approval process stage.
Right.
See, I just, when I read this, I just assumed that it meant a restaurant would have to call the city and say, okay, we're ready, we picked our furniture and everything, and can you send someone out to,
No, it's
Inspection.
it's done at the permit stage. It would be done
Okay.
at the permit stage.
Okay.
Yeah.
so.
I'm okay with that.
Comfortable
I'm
to-
okay, I'm better with that.
All
yeah.
right, so we're okay with what's in there.
Leaving that.
All right, good. All right, well, that was good discussion, though. You know, and these are, again, kind of the things that, maybe this is something we've talked about with the other, you know, the encroachment area or the outdoor right-of-way areas, is maybe this is something that we include like in a informational thing to our local businesses. Guess what? You know, you can have this, and this is how easy it is to get it. You know, because it sounds like there might be some question, or there might be people that are going, it's going to be a real pain to do it because I think it's so cumbersome, when in fact it's not. Because you wouldn't have brought it up if it wasn't important. So, you know, these are probably some ideas to, you know, put on a list, and
Well-
we got an economic development guy.
Would it be possible at a future date to do something sort of like the MSWD did with their preset plans for landscaping, and have sort of a preset plan for, sort of like what Jim is saying, for the outdoor dining area? Like, I don't know. But I don't know that it has to be in this document. You know, just like an informational flyer. This will pass.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we were already.
Yeah, we could do sort of an informational type of pamphlet type of thing to sort of guide some of the property owners. You know, I can tell from my personal experience that I thought a 75-pound weight on an umbrella was plenty to keep it from flying off, and it's not in this area. So we would want to make sure, just for health, you know, safety reasons, things like that are taken care of. But the goal is definitely to encourage more outdoor dining, especially in our downtown area. And we're actively talking with some of the property owners about potential locations that they can do it, that sort of thing. Of course, if you're serving alcohol in an outdoor area, there are fencing requirements that ABC requires, so we have to factor that into the permit as well.
Okay. Were there any others from any commissioners? Once, gone twice. Okay.
Could we review the changes again?
Yeah, go
Just
for
so-
it. Yeah, let's go ahead.
Restaurant with drive-through facilities and neighborhood commercial right now is permitted. Should it be a CUP?
I think yes.
Actually, Mr. Penn, members of the commission, if we can, this is a public hearing. I don't know, we do have one member, would you not? So if you'd like, Mr. Chair, we could open and close it unless Councilmember Potts, so we could deem it open and closed, and now bring it back to commission for discussion.
That's fine, I'm usually.
All right.
How's that?
Okay, so we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. We don't have any testimony out there. Okay, so we'll close the public hearing, and now it's more planning commission discussion.
Okay, now we're planning commission.
All right, so let's,
So,
So right now, drive-through, restaurants with drive-through facilities are permitted by right in multiple commercial districts, except for the downtown commercial districts. What Commissioner Stover is saying is it would be a CUP in the neighborhood commercial district.
then right now it's not requiring it?
Right now, it's permitted, it's a use permitted.
Okay,
But again, keep in mind the difference between these use types and the state of development. So if it's a brand-new restaurant, it will come before you as a development
Okay.
permit. So there's kind of that,
right.
yeah.
I'm okay with the way that it is. If it's a brand-new thing, I think we should do the public hearing like we did with Dairy Queen kind of thing. But I mean, if it's an existing facility, I don't really.
If it's going to come before us, I'm kind of okay with that too. I just want to make sure we're not running over any kids in the neighborhood.
Okay. So leave as is?
Yep.
Yes, consistent? Okay. The next one I had, I think,
Mini mall.
mini mall. Remove that as a permitted use period from downtown. Downtown commercial, yeah.
Yeah, we're good. Everybody okay with that? Okay.
Okay. Caretakers' quarters in all commercial districts.
I'm for this just because I think housing is at a crisis, and at the last meeting, the homeless problem came up twice, and I think in any instance that we can increase housing, we have the responsibility to do that. That's the reason I'm asking for this.
Chris? Any-
I'm not a big proponent of that. Just
Okay.
spoke about it yesterday. What are the negatives you see from that?
Well, potentially, in essence, you're introducing, a residential component in kind of all commercial districts now. The whole sort of point of the caretaker's quarters was really to provide security in certain types of land uses, such as a storage facility or RV park, or a place where there's 24 hours, where they're open 24 hours. That's typically what they're used for. Or they might be caretaker's quarters in an industrial facility, again, if it's permitted by law. As far as a way to provide housing, I'm not sure that's the ideal approach, to
Well,
have.
one at a time.
Yeah. But it kind of depends on which business that it's there for, if it sort of makes sense or not. Obviously, you wouldn't need one for a McDonald's, right? Or, some of the other, or even a big box store or anything like that. It would kind of depend on the use, whether it was.
Well,
made sense.
I highly doubt that a big box store is going to even ask for something like that. But I think that if there was, an entity that did want to be in the commercial zone and have a caretaker's quarter, I don't know why we would prohibit that. It seems as though communities that have residents 24 hours a day are a lot safer, and that actually these sort of mixed-use environments in commercial districts are actually proving to be much safer in cities. So that's my argument on it.
Well, in that situation, would you just roll over residential code for that specific building during a plan check?
I'm sorry. asking.
So for a caretaker's quarters, how would you?
Oh, how would we view it from a building code
Yeah,
perspective?
just-
As a residence, yes.
Separate permit, everything?
Not necessarily a separate permit, but whatever is just, whatever's built in that resident would have to meet the residential code. For example, fire sprinklers and things like that. Although most commercial requires fire sprinklers these days. Egress and ingress would have to, we would review it from a building code perspective as a residence, like a multifamily type of residence.
And then it would also adjust parking requirements and what have you too, a little bit.
Yeah. Again, depending on the size, would dictate how many parking spaces are required.
I mean, I understand what the intent of a caretaker is, but if they decide to use it as a regular rental, then does that become a problem for code enforcement or anybody? Is that an issue to anybody?
Yeah,
I mean, they
it's
say it's
not
for my-
really a caretaker's residence. It's,
That's my concern is over a 15-minute conversation. I don't think there's enough time to really sort through everything and what it would affect, the ripple effect of doing that. That's my take.
We've got all night.
so, I'm not sensing consensus on this one.
So I think that, I mean, this is probably good for a good discussion on housing in itself. I mean, but, I mean, I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea, but I also know that you go down that path, and the next thing you know, and I've seen this, it's, next thing, the upstairs unit ends up being a rental to a family, and it was never intended for that. It was intended for a person to be the caretaker, and now they've rented it out because they know they can make $1,500 a month instead of $800 a month as a caretaker unit. So they switch the gears on it. So we've kind of defeated that. If we're gonna look to make mixed-use development in this area, the code allows this now because of some of the changes, correct?
Yeah, with these changes,
Correct.
it's now allowed in commercial downtown, right?
Right, so it's allowing the mixed use of commercial residential with these changes. So that addresses that issue of providing more housing in there. I just, it's, like I said, I'm not opposed to the idea, but we're going down a rabbit hole that it creates other things when the real issue is, if we're looking for more housing options, the changes we're doing today allow for more housing options in the downtown by mixed-use developments.
Just to be devil's advocate, what difference does it make if they rent out the apartment and someone is housed, or if it's a caretaker's family it's housed?
I mean, law enforcement issues come into play, and stuff like that, in my opinion. It's not original intended use. It's there for a caretaker unit to maintain the building or the property that it's on. So I just feel like it's causing more work for planning, and one of my reasons for being up here is helping make the permitting process more expedited for everybody. I've gone through the process. I've gone through this municipal code in depth with Colleen, prior community development director, building officials, and it was very muddy. So clearing it up definitely helps out everybody. And I think adding more and more to it at this time slows that process down.
So, Mr. Chairman, I can read the definition of caretaker's quarters,
Okay.
and I think you see what the intent is. It means a
Yep.
permanent residence that is secondary or accessory to the primary use of the property and used for housing a caretaker employed on the site for any non-residential use where needed for security purposes or to provide 24-hour care or monitoring of people, plants, animals, equipment, or other conditions of the site. That's the definition of a caretaker's.
Right. Okay. So then that really kind of, that you're basically looking at kind of a studio with a hot plate type of caretaker thing, but also an office mix too.
It could be a varying sizes, but the intent is there to
Right.
serve the facility, to take care of the facility.
So it's not really, the way that you read that, I don't read a residential unit.
It's not an apartment, just
Yeah.
located at the back of the building. right?
Okay.
What do we gain by restricting the caretaker's units?
Well, I think if you want to allow multifamily in all residential districts, that's a change to the land use tables. So, I mean, versus, given the definition of caretakers, quarters, the intent there is to provide security and monitoring. If you just want to allow multifamily residential in all,
No, that's not, I'm not suggesting that. I'm just asking what difference does it make if we allow a caretaker's quarters in all of the commercial districts? What do we gain by not allowing it in the districts that it's disallowed?
I am concerned about the issues raised where it doesn't become a caretaker's quarters anymore, it just becomes an apartment in the back of a retail.
And would code compliance not follow up on that?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I mean, if it's going to become a code issue, it's going to be I can't speak for all of code, they're not here. I could see a situation where it could become a little bit difficult for code to discern whether or not somebody's living there as an apartment, whether or not somebody's living there as a mere security. So, and that now becomes a defensible position that it puts the city in, where now I'm going to have to defend, something like that. That's all I'll say about that. It's up to the commission, obviously, about, whether or not it's a caretaker or another kind of residential use. I think what I'm hearing from Commissioner Stover is that housing's a crisis. We're all dealing with that. And I think that with a lot of the code changes that staff has included in this go-around is to create more of a mixed-use district downtown. So I think maybe that was part of the intent, is recognizing the shortage of housing, and that's one, what I'm going to call fix, for lack of a better term. I think that maybe with respect to what you're suggesting, from what I'm hearing, we don't have a consensus at this moment, but from what I'm also hearing is that it's actually worth looking into. And so it might be something that staff could look into maybe at a future date and actually look at, some of these issues. The other issue I see is that their zoning districts are kind of, I'm a land use attorney, so it's a little bit out of my purview to say this, but I'm going to say it anyways, to create certain districts for certain things, right? So you have commercial districts really kind of for that vibe of the community, et cetera, that kind of liveliness of the community. Again, I don't know one way or the other. I just don't. If, having those kinds of quarters is, A, how compatible that would be, and B, I don't know about the code enforcement issue and whether or not it would actually be discernible to have somebody say, hey, I'm here as a caretaker, or could just be somebody living there permanently. So those are the things that I bring up. Sorry if I overstepped, but.
So a caretaker will be permanently living there for how long? They're maintaining the yard or business, right? So is there something we can put in there by the definition that you read of the caretaker, something you can put in there saying that it has to be a caretaker part that,
It's in there.
the definition?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it has to be a caretaker, but is there any way we can put in there that the business owner has to use it for that reason and not rent out it to anybody just to live there?
I think it says it's caretaker unit is not a permanent.
It's not, caretaker
Dwelling.
unit by definition is not a residence.
So
But there's no way of anybody knowing that. That's what the issue we're having right now, right?
No.
Well, I would say if it's not a problem, it's not a problem. If it's not like a big party going on at the Amazon caretaker unit,
Yeah, but
Nobody's
you
gonna
can't make
know.
code based on that, though. You got to make code with some guidelines. You can't just say, well, if it's not a problem, we'll just let it go. I can tell you, 20 years managing code enforcement and economic development stuff, that these are a real pain. Because they do, it's just a caretaker's unit. We got a hot plate and we got a little corner refrigerator in here. And then they end up bringing permanent renters in them who are doing that, if you see them, they're instructed by the property owner to say, I'm just a caretaker. And yet, you go there at 8 o'clock at night, the place closes at 5, and yet they're inside having dinner, watching TV, they're with their girlfriend or their wife, they're doing that. You go by there at nighttime, the police get a call for service at 1 o'clock in the morning because the person was too drunk, they get in a fight, and that's how they get these things. And so, it goes down, well, it's not fiction. It's not fiction, trust me.
it happens often.
It's not fiction, it's factual. I know that, was my career, knowing that. The reality of it is, if I'm correct, is that the code changes that we're doing are allowing more housing there.
That's
Correct?
Yeah,
Okay,
all over
so
through all
Isn't that what
zones.
we're trying to achieve?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it achieves that right today, what staff has done in the changes.
Yeah, but more,
more is more.
that's all I'm saying. More. Okay.
Well, I don't see a consensus on this because it's a little confusing, and that's fine.
All right, so so far we've got the remove mini mall.
Great.
Okay, let's try another.
Still need to determine whether we want the tattoo establishments in all commercial districts or just the one?
Yes,
Yes?
Everywhere.
Yes?
everywhere.
Okay. Okay, so we will remove that section in D. think there was consensus on the suggestion of removing the commercial district specific standards table with the pluses and minuses, and then we would
Yes.
just highlight that in the use
Yes.
tables. Okay. Let's see. And then I think that's it. Did I capture them all?
Right, and then it's encouraged by the commission for staff to reach out to the business community and let them know the various options and differences they've got for outdoor dining. So they know that both public property and private property, so they know that it's not as cumbersome as they may think it may be. And then encourage the same type for economic development, that they also know of that for their outdoor dining options, that it's not a whole long permit thing, that it's rather easy with what they have to do. So, and that the standards are for weather-based standards, basically. I'm gonna write that down, I like that word. Sorry. Weather-based standards, you like that?
Okay.
Okay, we all have our quirks.
And I would just point out, it's kind of like the food truck parks. And so there, that was a conditional use permit, and staff is recommending that it's, a staff level approval AUP at this point.
Right. Okay, was there anything else? Going once, going twice? You double check your notes? Do you triple check?
I only have one page today, so you're lucky.
All right. Then we've done that.
You want a motion?
Yes, waiting for a motion.
I got a motion.
Okay,
Okay, I move that we recommend Chapter 17.12 to City Council with the following changes. In 17.12.01 table, we want to see the mini malls not permitted in the commercial downtown. And we want to see tattoos permitted in all of the commercial districts. And we'd like to see table 17.12.02 disappear.
got a motion? Do we have a second? Yes,
I'll second.
okay. All right, we got a motion and a second. Did it come up? We got nothing on our screen, Mr. City. Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right. Let's see, Chair and Commissioner reports. Do any commissioners have any reports they'd like to say, or?
I would like to just bring up for the future, I know we brought it up in the meeting the other day, and I'm hoping that we can get an update on the shade trees from the grant writing person.
I do have an update since we talked. The one that we applied for back in spring, I forget the name of it. It was a state grant, but we were not successful in that. But we are pursuing another one now with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And the city is joining in with other valley cities in that application to hopefully give us a better shot at it. And we'll know in October if we're successful in the award. So that's where we are in the grant writings scheme.
Okay. The others? All right. Moving on, Community Development Director report.
Okay, just update you on the next meeting, which will be August 22nd. At that meeting, we'll be bringing forward the residential districts chapter, and this is where a large part of the effort is focused on expanding residential opportunities throughout the city. And then also the plan is to bring amendments to our general plan, land use map, and zoning map. These are really house cleaning type of changes, not substantive changes, but just basically making our map current to the land uses that are already out there today. So that those two things hopefully will be coming to you August 22nd, and that's all I have.
All right. Then we shall go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.